welcome back to another Timberborn video. Not actually in Timberborn at the moment, but we will get there. So I've been doing a bunch of testing on the best way to make biofuel if you're playing with the folktales. So most things that I've seen suggest using potatoes, and I think that's based on the fact that the recipe in the refinery has a slightly higher yield, and we'll look at the recipes in a bit. But in reality, I think it might be better to use Spadadoc. So I've done a bunch of testing, and we're going to have a look at the results of that in a bit. So first, let's have a look at the refinery and the two main recipes. So I'm not going to look at any of the, not going to look at Catalyst and not going to look at the carrot recipe because that's a much lower yielding one. But we have potatoes and Spadadoc, and in both cases, you put in 2 water and 2 of the crop, and then every 3 hours for potatoes, you'll get 30 litres of biofuel, and for Spadadoc, you'll get 25 litres of biofuel. So per litre of crop that you put in, for potatoes, you're going to get 15 litres of biofuel, and for Spadadoc, you're going to get 12.5. So in the refinery, you get slightly less, but quite often the bottleneck is not the refinery, it's producing the crop. So let's look at the crops. So for potatoes, it takes 6 days to grow, and you get 1 potato per square that you plant. Because it's the folktales, you can use beehives, and I think that reduces the growth time to 4.2 days. For Spadadoc, it takes 12 days to grow, but you get 3 per square in those 12 days. I didn't test beehives, but Googling does suggest that they work, even if you place them underwater, so that would speed up the growth of Spadadoc quite significantly. But without considering beehives for Spadadoc, in terms of litres per day per square of crop, or litres per square of crop per day, it's the same number, Spadadoc will give you 1/4 of a litre. Potatoes growing on their own will give you 1.66, and potatoes with beehives will give you 0.24. So Spadadoc is the fastest growing crop for yield, although it takes a bit longer to grow. So, and that was why in my Folktales Let's Play that I've just finished with Update 5, I was growing a lot of Spadadoc for biofuel. Let's look at the test setup that I've used to check this, because quite often the maths and the theory don't tie up with in-game. So I've got 3 districts. They are completely separated, and they are only running on bots so that none of the crop produced gets eaten. I have an excess of bots in each district so that there are no empty jobs. I've used dev mode so that to put the bots in to give them fuel, catalyst, and punch cards so that they're running at their best. And what I did is I set the growth areas up based off of 2 farm buildings to maximize the amount that was covered. You will see that I've then increased the number of farm buildings because I found that 2 farm buildings wasn't really allowing for good testing. I've got 1 district growing potatoes, 1 growing potatoes with generous amounts of beehives in there to ensure good coverage, and then 1 growing Spadadoc. And what I've tested is for each of the 3 districts, having 4 farmers or bots working in each district, having 6 or having 12. And each of those districts also has 2 hauling posts completely full to do all of the moving of the crops and biofuel and things like that. So jumping into the game, this is what our colony, I guess, looks like. So you can see that none of the districts are linked, so there's no moving of crops between them. This was the first district that I created, so this has potatoes set to be grown in this whole area, which is covered predominantly by these 2 farms. There is a little bit that's not covered, but I'll speed through some time and you'll see that it doesn't really matter. And then we've got an irrigation channel which runs along here, 1 that runs through here, and a water dump here, and that keeps the whole area irrigated. I have the game set up so that the drought length is 0, so that's not a factor. We've then got the one with beehives, and you'll see that beehives cover pretty much everything. I'm not sure why that bit in the middle's not covered. It should be. Again, you'll see that it doesn't really matter too much. And then we have an irrigation channel running along here, one along here, and one down here. And then, as I said, each colony has 2 hauling posts and biofuel available, and punch cards, and lots of storage. And then we have our Spaladoc district, and so this is set to be planted with Spaladoc. These were the original 2 that I put in, and you can see the area that they cover, so that these beavers didn't have to swim back. These actually have some biofuel and punch cards stored here, which are set on obtain, so that they can keep refueled, because the swim is obviously quite slow compared to the bots running up to the biofuel tank. So what I'll do is we will just unpause all of these. I'll do it with the full setup of 12. And then because the aquatic farms only have 2, we have more of those. So we have 6 of those to get on 12 posts, and then we will unpause the game. And I was actually using the game speed mod. And if I can type in the right combination, we can run the game at much higher speed. And in fact, if I do speed 30, there we go. You'll see that quite quickly they get everything planted. I think the game actually looks quite cool at a really high speed, and I'm planning to use it in my next Let's Play series. I really like the way, a way of progressing time without having to pause and jump and stuff. You can still see what's going on, and you can see that in both cases, or in all 3 cases, the 12 farmers have pretty quickly got everything planted. And what I found with having 4 or 6 is that on all 3 of these farms, they couldn't actually harvest the whole area they could plant. And that's one thing that I either want to Google or work out, is if you place one of these, how much can they actually farm in the time it takes to grow and replant, because the crops were growing quicker than they could harvest everything. So that was quite interesting. I have not really studied the game in this kind of way, so I'll let this jump ahead a bit and you'll see what I mean about the harvesting. You can see now that on the farm with the beehives, they've started getting crop up here and they're harvesting it. So this district is starting to gain potatoes. Everything else is still going to take another day or so to be ready. Obviously, the spider dock is going to be a lot more time. But you can see that with 12 beavers harvesting, that the crop is growing quicker than they can harvest it. So you really could use quite a lot smaller area to keep these fully employed. I've actually accidentally paused one of the farms there, but I'm not actually using any data for this. I just want to demonstrate what's happening. I've got the data already spreadsheeted and processed, so we should see crops starting to appear on this farm now. You can see the really weird tract where the beavers were all waiting here, and then as they came in, they planted as they came in. But this is the effect you see, that you get a ring around the farm where this is as much as they can harvest. It might be that if I placed things more optimally, so I put the 4 farms in sort of a quadrant each, the beavers wouldn't have to travel so far, so they might harvest more. I'm not sure. We're just starting to get Spanadoc now. It seems to take a bit, like a day longer initially to grow in, but at this point, as we're starting to get Spanadoc, you can see that our beehive district is up to 1.7 thousand potatoes. Our non-beehive district is up to 1.3, and we're just starting to haul in Spanadoc, and it's quite quickly growing, because every square that they harvest is 3 versus every square over on the potatoes being 1. And so, in fact, it feels like it's much more efficient in terms of beaver labor as well, because each time they go and harvest, they get 3 rather than 1. And you'll see that the two potato farms have settled now into these kind of circles. The one with beehives is slightly smaller radius because they're growing quicker, and the one without is kind of this ellipse shape around the farms. And the Spanadoc one, I think with 12 it actually manages to get kind of almost all the way out to the edges. But if you're not running, you know, we've got 6 aquatic farms here. That's quite a lot. It's if you're using less, that actually you need quite a lot smaller area. So let's jump back to PowerPoint and we can have a look at the results and what this means. So what I've done is I ran those 3 farms through 3 different sets of conditions with 4 workers, 6 workers, or 12 workers. At the end of every 6th day, I logged how many of each crop each district had. And I've then used the recipe in the refinery to turn that into a potential yield of biofuel. So that it accounts for the difference in how much biofuel you get from Spanadoc versus potatoes. And so I've the first set of lines shown is for 4 workers. So orange is Spanadoc, blue is potatoes, and red is potatoes. So you can see for the 2 potato ones, the actual rate that you get cropping is the same. There's just a bias because you get the first wave of crop earlier. And so if you want to really take advantage of having things like bees, you actually need more farmers to harvest the crop quicker, as well as the fact that it grows quicker. You'll see with Spanadoc that there's obviously a longer lag while it has to grow before you start getting any. But even at 18 days, so after the first 6 days, you've overtaken potatoes without bees, and you're pretty close to overtaking potatoes with bees. And by 24 days, it's clear, and you can see the gradient is much steeper as well. That Spanadoc is giving you a lot more potential biofuel. And I'm going to do some comparisons in a little bit, but definitely Spanadoc is winning with just 4 workers or farmers. If we go to 6, you can see the lines are a bit higher and the gradient for Spanadoc is a bit steeper. You get the same bias between with and without bees. But again, Spanadoc, it takes a little bit longer, but Spanadoc is better. And it takes a little bit longer because they're harvesting more of the potatoes. So yeah. Then if we go to 6 workers, you can see there's a weird kink in the Spanadoc one. I'm not sure what caused that. But definitely, again, Spanadoc takes the lead. It takes a little bit longer again because they're harvesting more of the potatoes while Spanadoc is growing in. But even if you've got a big farm with a lot of workers, you're going to do better with Spanadoc. And as I said, I have seen on Google that Spanadoc is affected by beehives. You can just place the beehives in the water and they work. I did not test that, and that again would get you even more growth. The last set of graphs I want to compare are for 4 workers on Spanadoc versus 6 on potatoes. And that's because that's how many workers you get in 2 buildings of each. So 2 aquatic farms versus 2 efficient farms. And even in that case, Spanadoc is better. It takes a bit longer, but you can see if I'd run the test a little bit longer with the gradient of the Spanadoc line, we would have been above potatoes with bees even. And this is yield of fuel potentiometer, so that's using 2 less, which is important for the next bit that I'm going to talk about. So first thing, even with 12 workers, all 3 crops were limited by how much could be harvested, even though the planting area was what was covered by 2 buildings. So that's something that I want to have a look at, I think, is how much land area can one farm actually cover. You are going to need multiple refineries to keep up. Spanadoc is more efficient to grow in terms of number of beavers. You can have 4 beavers growing Spanadoc, and it's equivalent to, or it's better than 6 beavers farming potatoes. Potatoes are more efficient in the refinery. So for every 5 beavers you have processing fuel in the refinery, you would need 6 for Spanadoc, but I think that trade is okay in my head. So I think there is a little bit more. So based on what I've tested, Spadadoc is the quickest to grow, but not the first to grow. So if you want a long-term supply, plant Spadadoc. Takes a little bit longer, but it will be the quickest to grow. The reality is it's probably map dependent. If you're on a map that's got lots of shallow water, grow Spadadoc. You aren't limited by land then. If you don't have lots of shallow water to grow Spadadoc in, you're not losing out growing potatoes. And the bit that I've not looked at, Spadadoc and beehives, that could be even better. So yeah. Hopefully this has been interesting or useful to you. If you enjoyed it, click the like button. Comments, questions, suggestions, what I've done wrong, stick them below. And if you're new to the channel, think about subscribing. I will see you next time.